the performances are going in the right direction. And I know it sounds daft losing 31-7 to Ireland, but the bookies had Ireland at 23 favourites. They lost by 24. They would, in golf terminology, they played to par. France were 27-point favourites and they drew. I think this is a game where there are so many question marks about what's happening in the French heads, and there is steady improvement in Wales. And I know some people who only look at results to gauge a team, they'll be laughing at this, but I think Wales have lost 3 out of 3, but they're headed in the right direction to win at home against France. And I think Wales can do it by a score, by 5, 6, 7 points.
Hello, welcome to our discussion of Six Nations Rugby. Week 3 is in the books. We're going to be talking about exactly what happened. A couple of surprises, or at least one big surprise with Stuart Barnes, the great former fly half of Bath, England and the British Lions, writes for the Times, wonderful commentator on the game of rugby. Really good when this Six Nations period is going. Lots to talk about with him. Good morning, Stuart. How are you doing?
Very well, Stig. Thank you.
Let's before we talk about your predictions, because you did not predict correctly Italy drawing with France. Should we start with England? We don't always start. I think we're pretty good on this show that we're not too Anglo-centric, actually. I think we've done a lot on Ireland. We've done a bit on France. But let's start with England, if you don't mind, Stuart, before we go through the other games. Because I think Italy-France is clearly a very interesting game. England-Scotland was a massive game, the Calcutta Cup. A couple of stats for you, Stuart. England 6 tries in 3 games, 1 try bonus point in 8 Borthwick games. We've said this since the World Cup. They're a fundamentally boring team often. Is that England's problem, that they don't play enough rugby?
Paradoxically, I think England's problem against Scotland was they tried to play too much rugby and they didn't know how to. They hadn't practiced for it and it really hurt them. The problem is that they are a poor attacking team, but that did not equate with trying to play too much rugby at Murrayfield. It was a strange one. When they play weaker teams and you feel this is the chance to express yourself and develop your game, they haven't under Steve Borthwick. When they play a stronger team where they should tighten up if they're going to win, as they did against South Africa but didn't against Scotland, they go the wrong way and they end up losing. I thought tactically it was a complete morass.
To explain that, what do you mean?
I mean that England's backline quite clearly didn't have the confidence or understanding how to take on Scotland, and then they use them. If your backline's not functioning, they become they become the sort of bonus. You use your forwards, you play for territory, and if someone produces something, as we saw, say, from Faye Wabosa in the 67th minute, well, that's a bonus, but you don't go looking for that. And England seem to go looking for their backs to win them the game. And this is what I've kept saying, that if you don't practice with backs, they don't one day become good. And you look at all the World Cup, and I don't care that they were winning games. They won games against teams they should beat.
Yeah.
They didn't develop at all. And you looked at a game against Italy, they tried a little bit, but it wasn't convincing, and it wasn't against Wales. But they were lower-rated teams, and England were able to get away with it. They then stepped up their ambition against Scotland, a better team than England, and they came a cropper. And that's why I say it's a tactical mess of the highest order. They play, as I say, they play not enough rugby against weaker teams, and they try and play too much rugby against better teams. We're not just looking at the 23 players here, we're looking at the management and how they're sending them onto the field.
Do you think they've also found their level a bit, Stuart? I mean, in recent years, I mean, there'll be examples to counter this, but I always feel England win the games that I kind of think they'll win the games, and they lose the games I expect them to lose the games. They're kind of stuck in this sort of flatness at England that we didn't think they'd beat Scotland, and they didn't. We didn't think they'd beat South Africa, and they didn't. We thought they would probably beat Fiji, and they did. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of this, the level of English rugby is something and it's mediocre. And yet the players come out and they say how great everything is. They spun that throughout the World Cup. But actually, there's just a flat line in English international rugby. Is that fair?
Yeah, but I don't think it's the players. I think it's the management. I think the players are not being given a chance to develop. You compare England to Ireland. Ireland lost a couple of games early on under Farrell, and I can remember thinking they're heading in the right direction. They lost narrowly to a Welsh team that won the tournament. They lost by 2 points in Ireland to France. Last time they lost there, that was over 3 years ago. But you could see a clear progression of intent and ideas. I don't see, and Stig, this is not me now. This is not after the event. I've been saying ever since Steve Borthwick came, there is no sign of progressive thinking there. There is no development. They're not pushing the barriers. Until you push the barriers, until you try and do things that go wrong behind the scrum, then you're going to be losing the games you should lose, and you'll narrowly win the games you should win. And it's Groundhog Day for me. It's just we're now 3 games into the Six Nations. Steve Borthwick said before it started, we've made slow starts before, and I got some stick because I wrote, well, it's not. They didn't get the slow start was because their first game was against Scotland for the last 2 years, and then they beat Italy and Wales. So after 3 games for the last 3 years of Six Nations, England have beaten Italy and Wales, and they have lost to Scotland. And the most important thing is, and how have they changed as a team? And the answer is not a jot, not a jot. That they believe that they can take people on up front. They're either terrible or they ignore their backs when they go behind. There is something so seriously wrong with the management of this England group of players. If you look, someone said to me, "At club and country, they're different." The difference is that Bath have an offensive coach and Northampton have an offensive coach who really know what they're doing, and they have clubs that are intent on development and improvement, and we're seeing it after difficult periods. England don't have that.
Is Steve Borthwick just a good club coach? I mean, because he was at Leicester. I'm from Leicester. I was a season ticket holder from Leicester from the age of 6 till I left home. So I will always love Steve Borthwick a bit because he took a Tigers team that had been in the wilderness for a decade, and he basically said, you're going to be good and you're going to be physical. You're going to carry the ball. We're going to kick well. We're going to chase the backside out of the ball, and we're going to be the fittest team there, and we're going to be committed. And they won the league. And look, they won that league. Even I can say this. Excuse me. Everything spun their way. They won games they wouldn't have normally won. I didn't think they'd beat Saracens, and they did. They had a good plan in the final. But is that what he is then? I mean, are we saying, A, he's a good club coach, but not an international coach? And B, therefore, he should no longer be, after this Six Nations, England need a new start. They need a new approach. They need a new management.
I would say Steve Borthwick is, it's not about club or country. It's about where he is in the pecking order. I think he's a fine forwards coach, but I think he needs to be part of the jigsaw. I think at the moment, he's not trusting enough fresh voices. One thing I will say, that they got Felix Jones from South Africa, who's a fine coach. And yeah, I'll say we need to just have a little look and see what Felix Jones can do. It's very hard for him to make a change. But I look at the Richard Wigglesworth attack coaching thing and the fact that, Nick Evans was dispersed with, and I sort of do tear a bit of hair out. And I think, if Steve Borthwick was a forwards coach for any team in the world, I'd have no issue. I think he's a very smart coach. He knows the forwards inside out. I don't believe he's a number one. I think some number twos are brilliant, but they're not number ones. I think back to my old Bath teammate, Andy Robinson. He did a great job coaching England's forwards to the World Cup. Clive Wood's biggest error that he made was when he said Andy Robinson should take over from him, so Wood would maintain some sort of influence and continuity. That was the error. Andy was not. He failed as a number one man for Bristol, for Scotland, for England, and that's not because he was a bad coach. He's a good coach, but he's not a number one. And Steve Borthwick, I don't think he's a bad coach. I think he's a very good. I think he's a very fine coach, but I don't think he's a number one. I think.
So how do they find their Farrell then? Because uh, there aren't that many inspirational leaders, I suppose, or people who. How do you find your Farrell?
Well, England had their moment. I mean, England could have tried for Scott Robertson. They could have thrown the money around after Ronan O'Gara. They could have done that. I don't personally think Rob Baxter would have been the man, because I think Exeter play to a pattern. I think England are trying to develop a pattern. International coaches, you don't have players all the time, all year round, so you've got to have a flexibility. And I don't think Steve has that flexibility. The problem now is, I mean, England, I don't know, Stig, whether there's even any point talking about this until the end of the World Cup, because the England management are not going to make a move now. Eddie Jones was a couple of years past his sell-by date. It was obvious to all and sundry. It took too long for them to do anything there, and it cost England. I think they can say, look, he's only 1.5 years in, so we'll wait. My view is, and that's fine. That's a position, and that's the RFU's position. But we know it's linked not just to the amount of money, but to their own credibility. And to someone like me, my job isn't, I'm not to worry about the money, because that's a hypothetical, and I got to look beyond the hypothetical as a rugby writer. And what I see is an alarm bell ringing to the point of constant tinnitus. It hasn't felt right from day one. No. We're 1.5 years in. How can I say it feels right now? So I don't think England are going to do anything, but I think they should have looked for something different. Scott Robertson's the most exciting young coach in the world. Ronan O'Gara ain't far off. That's the sort of thing they should have been looking at. As it is now, I think if Steve Borthwick is going to remain in charge, then he's got to be making changes. He's not going to be changed, but it looks as if changes are required. Nick Evans, they poked their toe in the shallow end and got scared. That didn't work. You look at someone like Vesti of Northampton. You look at Lee Blackett of Bath. These are coaches who have made a difference. But are they going to leave their clubs for England? I mean, England at the moment isn't a particularly... To be Steve Borthwick's number 2, I don't think is necessarily an exciting thing for an attack coach.
No. And whether he changes... I mean, we might talk about this later on, how important coaches are, because it strikes me that coaches in the international sphere are much more important than you'd think they are, actually. A coach is really a significant figure.
Yeah, coaches are, but the problem is we've got this confusion between the importance of a coach developing players and developing variety of style, and that seems to have jumped over to a belief in some teams that the coach is so important that he has to tell you your entire game plan.
Yeah.
And so there's this discrepancy between complete autonomy of the coach and the clever coach who doesn't tell you what to do, but he suggests it and he brings it out. It's the difference between a bullying school teacher who in history just drills dates into your head and you're thinking, Christ, I thought I'd like history, but I don't. It's boring. And then you get the other history teacher who comes up and he asks you a question and you don't know the answer, but you go away and think about it. That's how New Zealanders coach their players into becoming cerebral players. Yeah. That's what Ronan O'Gara does. Ronan O'Gara hasn't gone to La Rochelle and told them what to do. He's worked with them. He's opened minds. And right now, we are not an open-minded nation in any way when it comes to our rugby.
That's such an interesting point. Farrell is the other great example of that type of coaching as well, isn't he? Right, let's move on to some other teams. Scotland, some questions for you about the Six Nations weekend, Stuart. Should Scotland really be still able to be fighting for an unlikely Grand Slam? Should they really be 3 of 3, Scotland the second best team in the tournament. They're probably going to finish as the second best team in the tournament. You would have thought.
They quite clearly now, and this I hate hindsight, but quite clearly after what happened in Lille on Sunday, Scotland should have beaten France.
Yeah.
And this isn't just a controversial official's decision. They should have won that game, and they didn't win that game. Scotland right now look the second best team in the tournament, although don't discount France finding something as good as they were bad in Lille. They still have a lot of good players. As for Scotland now, it's going to be hellishly frustrating. They were plenty better than England. England weren't good, but they were plenty better than England, and there was an opportunity for Scotland because, well, we'll talk about France later, but I think Fabien Galtier is in something of a pit at the moment, and Scotland could have risen above them.
Well, let's get on to France, Italy. Before we go on to France, because I've got some thoughts about France as well, I want to hear your opinion on. But Italy, let's talk about that game. So it ends.
The heroes of the weekend.
Here, we've basically discounted Italy for this entire tournament all the time, but they have been known to pull out a performance, and they've done that. Before we get to Italy generally, the shot clock. You know, this is a game. It's 13-all. It's a kick. The ball falls over. The shot clock's running down. He hurries it. He misses it. He would normally get that kick. Question one for you, Stuart Barnes. Rugby is full of delays, mainly when 8 very heavy people refuse to scrum down properly and everyone just stands around looking at them. That's where the delays in rugby come. Was there really a problem that needed fixing with a shot clock? Is a shot clock a good idea in your view?
It's gimmicky, but I think a minute is way too long in an 80-minute game. It's over. Every conversion is basically over 1% of a match.
Yeah.
So I think there is need for it. I frankly, I'd have just said, instead of a shot clock, I'd have said you got 30 seconds. I thought there was a question about the French rush. I think it put Garbisi under slightly more pressure than he needed to be. But in the end, it's just a ball falling over is just one of those terrible moments.
Shouldn't that reset? Why does that not reset? Am I missing something? Why does that not reset the shot clock?
No, because if it falls over, you know, the placement of the ball is time. It's unlucky. It's unlucky. You go for a drop kick. I don't have an issue. I don't have an issue with that. I have utter sympathy for Garbisi. It must have been heartbreaking. I thought he was heroic to produce a smile within a minute of missing that kick, but it wasn't in front of the post. It was a massive pressure kick. I say this now: nobody has considered the view that he might have missed it anyway.
I'm sure that's right.
And listen, I a million years ago, I missed easier kicks than that in a cup final at Twickenham in the last seconds because I rushed the kick and I've tried to get the demon out of my head. Now, Garbisi, when he reset, that demon got in there, and for a split second, he's thinking, "Oh Christ, is this why I'm gonna miss it?" And you just don't know. He may have missed it anyway. It was the pressure kick of his life. And until he kicks it, we don't know how he reacts. That is not in any way denigrating him as a kicker. I'm just suggesting no one has said he might have missed it anyway, because it was huge pressure. It's far better for him to have been on the touchline where he was for the conversion, because if he misses it, he hasn't got all of Italian rugby going, "Oh, Paolo, you've blown it." No one would have blamed him. As it is, he's in a position where the poor bloke is expected to get it because kickers are so good these good days, and he hits the post.
How were people when you missed yours, Stuart? What were your teammates like when you missed it? Did they laugh at you? Did they sympathise with you? Did they stare at you angrily in the bath afterwards? What's the reaction like?
No, it was, funnily enough, it was for Bristol against Bath, and the Bath boys rushed up and they said, "Get on our bus on the way home." They were so delighted with my cock up. It's a bit cruel, but bloke called Roger Sparrow was in charge, and he did cruelty very well. As for the Bristol, but that is better than the reaction. Your teammates, it's this thing when you've in life when you've done something so bad or something awful has happened to you, and people who you know cross the street not to avoid you, but they just don't want to look you in the eye because they know you feel like a piece of, and and so you get that feeling. And so I was watching Italy, and I thought the Italian reaction was magnificent because they went up to him and they gave him a hug straight away. He will still be feeling pretty bad about that. But Paolo, it ain't your fate. It's life and it happens.
Yeah, exactly right. And also the fact that Italy, I mean, Italy, it's progress for Italy. I'm sure they'll see that in the cold light of day. A couple of quick questions for you, Stuart. Draws in championship games. This is a tournament. They should be playing extra time. They should be playing extra time. He should have had a chance to redeem himself with a drop goal that day, because a draw is not an acceptable result in a tournament.
I think a draw is a perfectly acceptable
I
result.
thought you might say that.
Life is, there is more to life than black and white. There's that grey in between, and that's what a draw is. A draw is 2 points. My issue, I think, the problem is the bonus point for getting within 7, and maybe even the bonus point for getting more than 4 tries. I think there's a win, there's a loss, and a draw, and I think there's 0 points, 2 points, 4 points.
Do you really? Has it not encouraged more tries, the 4-try thing?
Yeah, yes, it does, but it's an artificial sort of encouragement.
Yeah.
That's what teams should be doing. You should be saying, right, we're 20 points ahead, but this team can fight back. Let's get another try. And it's the game is not about tries. The game is about an intent to play. It is about power. It is about pace. It is about intent, and it is about intelligence. All those things come together. It's not just about running in tries. I covered a game for the ST Sunday Times when Bristol beat Bath, and there were 14 tries. And to me, it was a boring game because after a while, the tries came too easy. A try comes once every 5.5 minutes. Who cares about encouraging tries? That's tedious. It's encouraging an intelligent and a physical game. That's what we should be looking for, I think.
Let's talk about France.
Yeah.
So there's a thing in American football where the team that gets to the Super Bowl but doesn't win has a terrible season generally the season after. Yeah. Often if you win the Super Bowl, you have a chance to repeat and you tend to have a good team. But really, if you're the team that gets close, you should still have a really good team the next year. Sure. And very often you just don't, because the disappointment just seeps in and ultimately you just can't get back to that level. And I know France didn't get to the finals of the World Cup, but effectively it was their World Cup. It was their home World Cup. It was their thing they've been building to. Are we just seeing the king hangover? So either French rugby's in crisis because they've lost a couple of players, or actually this is just the king hangover from the World Cup disappointment that they've not been able to shake.
Well, it's not a crisis because they've got a lot of very good players, and you look at the French teams in Europe, they're still strong. Where there's a crisis, I think, might be in management. You've got to remember Fabien Galtier went to Japan, the 2019 World Cup, because France had the vision to start preparing for 2023, even as they were going into 2019, because they didn't think they had a chance. They had the guts to do what England didn't do and say, look, this World Cup's a bonus. The next one's what it's all about. And Galtier, whilst wanting to win matches in the interim since then, everything has always been about the World Cup. And France built a Grand Slam team. They built a team that lost only to Ireland away. They beat a team that was consistently beating New Zealand and South Africa and Australia. They went into that World Cup as the rightful favourites. They lost an incredible game, a once in a lifetime game of rugby. And I wasn't at that game because I was covering England Fiji in Marseille. But I was in a Corsican restaurant at night watching it with hundreds of French people sitting outside, and there was a great atmosphere. But what I noticed when the final whistle was blown, there was not screaming and shouting. They got up, they shook hands, and they quietly walked away. And I thought it was just like we've been at a party for 3 4 weeks, and, and someone's just gone and pricked all the party balloons. And I felt that from there on, the World Cup, it did lack atmosphere in France, but that was on a general level that I could understand. But if you put yourself in Fabien Galtier's shoes, everything in his professional life has been leading towards that. And I just think none of us can understand how much that has hurt.
Yeah.
And maybe the Ireland performance was a hangover. Scotland, they were saying it's one of our best ever wins because they knew just how deflated they were. And Italy was even worse. And I'm looking at this now and I'm wondering whether that wasn't a knockout punch delivered to Fabien Galtier. And I'm wondering whether France are in a situation where what he produced for France may not come again. And it could be that he's in coaching terms a dead duck from here on in.
There's nothing worse than coming close. That's the other problem,
No,
isn't it?
you're absolutely right. If I think any stage he lost in the quarterfinal, but it was to the eventual champions, and they know they could have won that game.
Yeah.
So the agony of that has just destroyed him. And I don't think it's about confidence. I think maybe it's a psychological thing. Yeah. It must be very, very hard.
Let's look ahead to round 4, Stuart. Your predictions were, I think, everyone's going to forgive you, France, Italy, because I think if you'd have predicted a draw there, you'd have been in the wrong business. You should just be a professional gambler. Let's look ahead to round 4. Italy, Scotland, which is interesting, this, because Scotland should be on a roll, but so will Italy be. I mean, it's in Italy. I mean, you have, well, tell me who you think is going to win, but this is not the game that Scotland may have thought it was going to be a week ago, perhaps.
No. I mean, France should have been 20-odd points up at half-time. That's true. And Scotland have got to say, we have to do that. And Scotland have the capacity and the firepower to score tries, as we saw. England is saying we gave tries away, but blimey, I mean, if they give away tries, England would be pretty happy scoring them, wouldn't they? They were brilliantly finished, long-range scores, some superb play. So Scotland have the firepower. Italy will be on a high, and they are in Rome, and they gave England a game in Rome. And Scotland, of course, are now, they're 2 from 3. They've got to keep going. They have got to keep going, and I think they will. I think we have to understand how poor France were with 14 men. Again, they've got a red card in the second half.
Yeah.
I think the whole mojo has gone out of French rugby. Italy played a prick balloon. Scotland are better than that. I'm going for Scotland. I think there'll be tries. I think it'll be a very entertaining game. And I think Scotland, despite Italy drawing with France, I think Scotland will win. If the bookmakers were going 10, 12 points as a reaction to the draw, I think I would be suggesting you had a couple of quid on Scotland. I think they'll win comfortably.
England, Ireland, which is always a difficult game. It's at Twickenham, big game. Ireland, first ever to go back-to-back Grand Slams on the table. This is the sort of game that could be a banana skin for Ireland, theoretically at least, but there's only one team in this in terms of you have to pick the better team here. It's Ireland every single day of the week. Will Ireland win in Twickenham?
How can you say Ireland won't win? You can't. because you can't even go back to the Twickenham factor because England have got used to losing there against good teams. Um, and Ireland again, I felt they weren't at their best against Wales, but the sheer variety of their attack in the first 10 minutes made it a heroic feat of Wales to hold them for as long as they did. And I don't know if England's defence is any better than the Welsh defence, and I don't think Twickenham is the fortress is the cliche, isn't it, that it once was. And Ireland, I think, against Wales, everyone was saying this is going to be a walkover, and Farrell was having to say, I think he used that very phrase, banana skin, and said it is, I'm not having this talk about it's a banana skin. It's more than that. It's Wales. They're a good rugby team. We have to be on our game. He will say to his team, look, England have lost again to Scotland. They're going to be hurting. They've got a big pack. There's 82,000 fans at Twickenham, the majority against us. This is a hard game. Whether it should be or shouldn't, psychologically, Farrell can say it that way. And I think there is such a gulf between England and Ireland. I can't see England getting within 9-10 points if they play really well.
Yeah. And finally, interesting for your thoughts on this one, Stuart, Wales, France, in Wales. This could either be a statement game from France showing all is not as lost, or this is an opportunity for Wales, not won yet, to do something.
Wales have not won yet, but they were very good in the second half against Scotland. They did a bit against England.
Are you going for Wales?
I didn't think it was a hopeless performance in Ireland. Warren Gatland has wisely kept saying this team is about performance. Get the performances right, the results will come. The performances are going in the right direction. And I know it sounds daft losing 31-7 to Ireland. But, the bookies had Ireland at 23 favourites. They lost by 24. They would have, in golf terminology, they played to par. France were 27-point favourites and they drew. I think this is a game where there are so many question marks about what's happening in the French heads, and there is steady improvement in Wales. And I know some people who only look at results to gauge a team, they'll be laughing at this, but I think Wales have lost 3 out of 3, but they're headed in the right direction to win at home against France. And I think Wales can do it by a score, by 5, 6, 7 points.
There we go. I like that one. You've stuck your neck out there. That's a good one. Stuart, we will see what happens, and we'll come back and maybe we'll laugh at you slightly, but probably not. I think they're all very sensible predictions there.
What the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Good luck. Good. I want Wales to win as well, so why not? Stuart, great to speak to you as ever. We'll speak soon.
Pleasure, Stig. Thank you.
The great man, Stuart Barnes there. And remember, if you love rugby, you should be reading about it in the Times. Stuart writes brilliantly about it all the time as we head through the Six Nations. Round 4 on its way. We'll be back at that point to discuss it. And if you like the radio, do listen to me and Ant Mamir every Monday to Thursday from 6 o'clock on Times Radio. Thank you for joining us.